But at the age of 95, the legendary actor finally shed the mask and showed the world the darker side of himself that no one had ever suspected. He talked about the 6 stars that betrayed him when he needed them most. These were the people who were standing right beside him when they were at the pinnacle of their glory. But Clint Eastwood never forgot them. Number 1, Leonardo DiCaprio. The golden boy Clint Eastwood never forgave. What could possibly induce Clint Eastwood, the great one, to actually leave the set of his own film? This was the only possible answer: Leonardo DiCaprio. When the filming of J. Edgar started in 2010, the combination seemed like either pure genius or the most surreal joke ever. Here was the most even-keystoned man in Hollywood meeting the most volatile. However, the results would prove more like the latter. From the very first day, DiCaprio showed up with notebooks full of research notes, pages stacked with history, and annotated copies of the FBI documents. Clint's patience thinned rapidly, said sources. Leo showed up like he was trying to solve a mystery, while the answer should have been right in front of him. Only once did Clint crack a joke that was almost not irritated. "I wasn't the case," he quipped. The tipping point was in the emotional breakdown scene. DiCaprio nailed the performance in the first take. It was rough, authentic, and perfect. The set fell silent. Clint whispered, "Perfect. Cut." DiCaprio, however, wanted another take and another. With the 6th take, Clint was not behind the camera. He stood at the craft services table, with a cup of coffee in his hands, unreadable. A member asked if he was all right. "He's still looking for what I already found." After the end of the shoot, there was a silent standoff, Clint's silence. In the future, when the name DiCaprio was brought up in a casting call, Clint would shake his head. "He's a good actor, just not my kind." They never collaborated again, never stood together on the same set, nor exchanged a word. DiCaprio had his Oscar, but he never received another call from Eastwood. For Clint, perfection was not a repeat performance. It was a case of doing the right thing the first time and being done. Number 2, Michael Moore. The man who pushed Clint too far. When Michael Moore likened American Sniper to Nazi propaganda, it was game over on any possibility of Clint respecting him. Clint did not yell back at him in the press or anything. He simply made him disappear into thin air. Their feud had been building for years. Remember when Eastwood accepted an award at the National Board of Review in 2005? "If Michael Moore comes to my door with a camera, I'll kill him," Clint declared. The crowd with him was laughing. Clint was dead serious. This was no laughing matter with him. To him, it was drawing a line in the sand. "You have to know what this grudge is about," Clint says, with a deep sigh. You have to know what Clint Eastwood is all about: discipline, hard work, behind the scenes, and the old-fashioned code of honor. In Clint's eyes, the triumphalist propaganda of Moore's documentaries, indeed of Fahrenheit 9/11 in particular, amounted to mere grandstand theater and politics masquerading as high art. He views soldiers as chess pieces. "I see them as heroes," he told a friend of his in what amounts to a Clint Eastwood rant. Almost a decade ago, he publicly roasted American Sniper on social media sites with mirthful mocking of a resemblance to Nazi sniper epics parodied in Inglourious Bastard. That Clint had been simply spoofing the Clint Eastwood pictured in American Sniper movie trailer rankled. He doesn't forget slights, but deletes them. From then on, Michael Moore's name hasn't been mentioned in Clint's company again. With Clint Eastwood, you can work with a liberal and you can work with a conservative and everyone in between, but you'll never work with anyone who makes sport of our military. Number 3, Barbra Streisand. The perfectionist who daunted the cowboy. If there is a single name in Hollywood history that can make Clint Eastwood's jaw clench even at the ripe age of 9 decades in the industry, it would be Barbra Streisand. Clint Eastwood refused to even utter her name in an interview about a feud that would turn into the iciest war in the history of the film fraternity. This feud began when both Barbra Streisand and Clint Eastwood turned into directors from actors in the early 1980s. Barbra was famous for her perfection when it came to acting or directing. She would take up to 40, 50, or even 60 shots for a single expression to finally be captured on screen with perfection. Clint Eastwood worked the other way around. 2 or maybe 3 shots would be taken. And then they would move on to the next scene, because he would say, if it's not real the first time, then it's not worth filming. For Clint, Streisand represented all those things that bothered him most about modern filmmaking: control, egotism, and too much overanalysis. By the early 1990s, their differing ideologies had transformed into pure loathing. The failure of The Prince of Tides to get a Best Director nomination that year led to Eastwood being overheard telling a pal, maybe if she'd make up her mind a little quicker, she could get more than 3 pictures made in 15 years. This quip ran like wildfire through Hollywood circles. Then came The Bridges of Madison County. The project had been interested in Barbara as a director, until she finally, albeit after all these years, opted not to direct it. Noticed Eastwood, res-hot it, and served up a devastatingly gentle picture that garnered a nomination for Merrill, as well as a tacit triumph for Eastwood. After that, they avoided each other altogether. For Clint, Barbara came to symbolize all those things that bug him most about his work: ambivalence, control, and the death of instinct. In his lexicon, you get 1 shot off, not 50. Number 4, Tommy Lee Jones, the alpha male that the alpha Clint could not tame. On the first day that Tommy Lee Jones appeared on the set of In the Line of Fire in 1993, the story goes that Clint Eastwood whispered to a crew member, 2 bulls in 1 pen. This won't last. At first, they thought they'd make a perfect team. On the screen, the chemistry was great. Behind the scenes, it was war. There was nothing subtle about working with wily old Tommy. He liked to argue, rewrite dialogue, speak back, and continue performing past the cut call. Clint, who kept everything moving with a by-the-numbers calmness that bordered on the robotic, looked on in amazement. Jones remained in character between shots, a technician has remembered, while Clint would simply stand there, looking puzzled as to what he was even doing. The tension built to a crescendo during a fight sequence. Jones towered over Clint, his character fully engaged, his venom dripping from each and every word. Clint yelled cut, but Jones continued to hold his gaze, reluctant to let him go. The assembled crew held its collective breath as Clint turned to his assistant and, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, said, "Life's too short for that much theater," and walked out on set. From that day on, it was clear that Jones was not an option for any Eastwood production that came his way. "Great actor," Clint would tell anyone who would listen, "but we don't speak the same language." Number 5, Richard Burton, the drunk who pushed Clint's patience to the limit. Clint Eastwood was not a man known to lose his temper easily. However, Richard Burton pushed him closer than most. There was no ego or fame involved in the feud between the 2 men in 1968 on the set of Where Eagles Dare. Instead, it was a matter of discipline. Burton was late to the set each day. He slurred his words in dialogue. He reeked of the previous night's excesses. Yet Clint was already dressed and waiting in the wings as early as dawn, as Burton stumbled from one flubbed line to the next. Burton was caught up deep in his turbulent marriage to Elizabeth Taylor, and no night passed without a bar being involved. But every morning, the production suffered for it. Clint didn't cuss and scream and tell him what a fool he was being. He waited patiently and silently, and by the 10th time the line was botched by Burton, he allegedly whispered, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not by the hour." The reports have it that the entire unit erupted into nervous laughter, but Clint's words struck a chord that didn't sit well with Burton, who wasn't laughing and wasn't amused. The final nail came when he told the entire production that the entire project was no more than a paycheck to him. This Clint felt he could not condone or support or defend in any manner whatsoever. Every project is a commitment, he knew and practiced conscientiously. This project was no different, no matter the level of action or the involvement or the mush it might offer, but rather should deliver by action alone. Talented man. Wasted talent. Clint would cut down any future inquiries concerning the man he worked alongside all those years ago, one day succinctly and brutally. The picture was a success, but the man and Clint would be no more. Clint would never work alongside him or any of his relations ever again, and would rarely mention him or his work or his very existence, surprising a man who holds the mightiest of swords as the greatest and most potent and most fertile of weapons, the silent one. Number 6, Jean Seberg, the woman who broke Clint's patience. Clint Eastwood doesn't talk about Paint Your Wagon much anymore, and the reason is Gene Seberg. Paint Your Wagon wasn't just a joint project of Gene Seberg and Clint Eastwood in 1969. It was a project that made Clint Eastwood promise himself to never let his feelings be involved in his work again. Gene Seberg was a temperamental woman. Her mood changed faster than the way a child switches between cartoons on a television set in a department store. She could be sweet to everyone in the morning. Then, in the afternoon, she would just lock herself in her trailer and rest there. Clint Eastwood was her complete opposite in every aspect. By the third week of shooting, he was exasperated. She'd stop right in the middle of a scene to ask her motivation, remembered a script supervisor. Clint would just stand there, staring at the floor, waiting for the break to be over, like he's closing the door. But the real divorce took place when the movie tanked. Seberg told the press the wooden performance given by Clint contributed to the picture's failure. To Clint, she'd committed the ultimate sin. To trash his work in front of the world after he'd worked so hard to keep the thing afloat. This woman might as well not have existed from that moment on, he'd say. If someone did bring up the subject of the woman, he'd quickly steer the conversation in another direction, light a cigar, and walk away. When the news came out about Seberg's untimely passing in 1979, Clint chose not to say a word. He supposedly was genuine in his expressions of sadness, although he never wavered in his commitment. Some people are not suited for this kind of work, and I certainly do not want to deal with it twice. That's as much forgiveness as Clint Eastwood was willing to show in a lifetime of acting. What is your take on this? Was Clint Eastwood justified in cutting them out of his life, or was his silence excessive? Share your thoughts in the comments below.